What's going on, everybody? It's FREEDO here for Your Overwatch. You must have already heard about Apex Legends. 25 million players in a week? Are you kidding me? Let's check in the Twitch numbers yesterday. 650,000 concurrents. Shroud had like 200k himself. There's a good chance you already know about it and maybe are already even playing it. With all this hype around it, we had to take notice, and I think this is a real good time as Overwatch fans to compare the two and isolate some things that Overwatch most definitely should learn from a direct competitor. I know some people say, hey, it's a BR game, it's nothing close to Overwatch. Then I'd like to know why all the Overwatch players are playing it then. Trust me, it's doing some things right, and Overwatch can do these things right too. So I got a few takeaways that I want to share with you, and some new ideas as well that I haven't heard anybody say before, so let's get right into it. First and foremost, I want to outline that what Overwatch needs to focus on is something that Apex Legends does so well: the user experience. So not the gameplay, not the balance, but the actual feel of having to interact with the game. As I'm sure many of you know, because you have your own opinions, but you know ours as well, Overwatch has a lot of annoyances, and learning from how Apex deals with some of these problems can come up with good solutions that Overwatch should implement as well. So first and foremost on that list, most important is the ping system. This should be a no-brainer. Overwatch already had a communication wheel in place, so really they did lay some of the groundwork for this. Calling out your ultimate, saying you need healing, group up, these are all a good start, but Apex takes their ping system to a whole nother level, allowing you to communicate where the enemy is, key items on the map, and it's so snappy and accurate that oftentimes you feel like you don't even have to talk in the game if you don't want to. So with Overwatch already having systems like this in place, I think it's a no-brainer to buff up the communication wheel, and hey, it would just give us more voice lines and stuff they would have to record. I'm sure that costs money to do, but it would get us more invested in the moment-to-moment gameplay, which is oftentimes where Overwatch is more frustrating than it needs to be. Now on to our next point. This one's quite meaty. We're going to concentrate on things that are more deeply connected and complicated to the user experience of playing the game. Let's start off with the first and most primary thing you do: picking your hero. In Apex Legends, there's a fixed order to when you pick your hero, and in fact, it's random. But during that assemble your heroes phase, you're allowed to hover over what hero you'd like, so you have to go in your turn, but if your teammate wants to notice and respect that you're preferring to play a hero maybe they want as well, or gonna try out, maybe they just let you have it rather than snag it. Now, granted, this is a little bit easier in the Apex Legends context, because although team comp matters, it isn't entirely make or break. It's not like Overwatch where, realistically, every hero selection you make has massive ramifications to how your team comp plays, what you can counter, what will counter you, what you even can do as a team. It's way more complicated the way that works out. But frankly, because of that, the need of more forethought put into the assemble your heroes process needs to be fleshed out, with systems that help us facilitate picking our heroes in a more reasonable manner. Now keep in mind, this is distinctly separate from a role queue, entirely different, and should be much more feasible to put into place without destroying any of these systems that Overwatch already has. What I'm advocating for is a way to pick your role when already queued, so as to not mess up matchmaking, make queue times really long, or even quote-unquote force a meta. Instead, I'm asking for Blizzard to develop systems or social features or whatever you want to call it to help the process of assembling a team before the match starts. Because what it seems to me is that Blizzard put that big block of time before the game starts, where it says assemble your heroes, for you to discuss with your team over voice comms, what strategy do we want to go for, team? But in reality, this never happens. This would be fine and all you would need if Overwatch was a game where you teamed up in big groups to play the game, but as we'll go into later, that's disincentivized everywhere you look in Overwatch, despite it being the best way to get the highest quality gameplay. So instead, people don't do that, and what ends up happening on the assemble your heroes screen, there's a rush to insta-lock what hero you want, some awkward silence for a bit, maybe somebody tries to pipe up and advocate, hey, maybe we could use a tank. One healer might be nice, and then slowly people start to try to make the comp more workable, but it's all done reluctantly. And oftentimes, steaming with conflict and tension and anger, people are reading each other's profiles, saying, why are you playing this hero? You main this. When realistically, I think if Blizzard looked at the play experience of their game, they would directly be honing in on this as a problem and trying to solve it. Over a year ago, we've mentioned that the rank system itself itself is toxic, and this issue of toxicity in Overwatch goes all over the place, and it's presumed that people being mean over voice comms is the bane of the growth of the game, but I think that's quite an immature way to look at it, actually. As developers of a product, it's your job to fit it to work for the audience you have, and when you force them all to play solo queue because grouping is punished so much, you should have ways for assembling your heroes to be a fun thing that people want to do, rather than it be full of conflict, annoying, and stressful before the game even starts. So to get more specific in this, to emulate how they do it in Apex Legends, what if in Overwatch, during that assemble your heroes phase, instead of locking in your one trick, you instead went to a different screen where you started almost like a negotiation among your teammates on who's gonna play what role or who prefers what. And I have to stress, the more of this that can be done non-verbally, the better. Because another major problem at Overwatch is that because everything's so tense all the time, it's hard to speak up and call somebody out on something, even nicely. Wait, what do you mean you don't think I can play Zarya? I only have hours on Reinhardt because I'm forced to. Instead of forcing us to do detective work to figure out what our teammates want to play, let it be out and about known right from the start of the game. What roles do you prefer? You push a button, it moves things around, and then instead of our career profiles being full of misinformation, and I'll get into that in a second, what if our picks towards this had a bit of a record, or our preferences were shown outwardly to say I want to be a fill player or DPS tank healer, whatever, rather than assuming that our hero playtime is supposed to tell the world what we play. Because especially if you're like me and you play a lot of heroes, your top played hero isn't necessarily your favorite role or your top role. It might just be the one character you fill on in that role. So like, I might have the most time on Lucio, but really I'm a tank player. It's just that time gets split up more. And whenever I heal, I pretty much always lock Lucio because nobody plays it, therefore inflating my playtime on it. It doesn't tell the story, right? Instead, we should be able to communicate this either on our player profiles themselves or just at the start of the game. And if this was done in the first 2 seconds of the game starting up, or even if you just inputted it as you queued, even if it didn't change the ranked matchmaking experience at all, it just put the same members together, it just outwardly showed what you were trying to play, we can much more easily skip the tension and drama that happens as we figure out what type of comp we're trying to run. The other option other than that is to just lock who gets to pick first. That way, you always can get a chance to play what you want, and you know it's a fair system because the game does it, rather than hoping that the community figures this out. Because I think Blizzard's gotta be a bit utopian in their thinking, assuming that a group of strangers can somehow work together and compromise at any reliable rate to figure out things as complicated as Overwatch team comps. No, the game should have internal systems in place to facilitate this. Otherwise, it just turns into Lord of the Flies, where really anything goes, you make up your own rules as you go along, and there's no reliable structure that you can fall back on to make sure that you have a consistent play experience from game to game. You have no idea when you queue up if it's going to be horrible, great for you, or even the enemy, and that should have been changed like a year ago. But even without a solution like role queue, you definitely can do some of these simple fixes to decrease the stress of the build your heroes section of the game, where so many games are lost, or sometimes won for free. And as well, to the player card portion of this, I think Blizzard overvalued how much anybody would care about a thing like endorsements, which really is just a number that most people ignore, whereas what people do care about oftentimes is their player profile. If you want the good karma for being a fill player, have a way to actually show that on your profile. Even if we don't have a role queue itself, but instead this like select your role when we get into the game, those decisions could be charted onto our profile. And I'll tell you this, I would hope Blizzard knows a thing like this about the community, but I'm sure many of you will agree. Oftentimes I hear somebody filling on Ana or something pipe up and say, man, I've been filling on support and tank all day. I really would like to play DPS. I would say oftentimes a damage player will swap with them, because really Ana's a skill position anyway. What if on your player profile, your recent games, you could show whether you filled for the team or locked damage or whatever, and that way we can build empathy with one another rather than assuming everyone on our team is out to get us and take advantage of us, and oh, they're locking damage and they have a private profile, what do they know? He's just trying to throw my game. Why is our Mercy player playing Diva? All this drama doesn't have to happen. Building team comps is supposed to be one of the most fun parts about Overwatch, and it's the most stressful and obnoxious part about Overwatch. I hate to sound impatient with this kind of thing, but it's been years that we had no progress towards this internal conflict the game presents for itself. It isn't rocket science. There should be a way to make a diplomatic system that makes assembling your heroes fair, fluid, easy and fun instead of a big pain. And now on to my last and final point. This one's probably most important to us on a personal level, whereas I think the other systems are key for the entire player base, especially at securing the solo queue experience, which is why I wanted to say them first. But my last point is being able to play with your friends. It still baffles me to this day where Overwatch, a game that's entirely an esports team-based game, has either punished you, made it too difficult, or didn't reward playing with friends, which is outrageous because even the devs themselves say it's the best way to play the game. Compare over to Apex Legends. There was just straight up no barriers. Play with your friends? Yeah, of course. It's a hero shooter game where you're supposed to cooperate to reach an objective. You should bring your friends along, of course. And when people ask, well, isn't that unfair to all the players that match randomly with strangers? Yeah, of course it is. Well, that doesn't mean they're not having fun. This is how games have operated for 20 odd years, and it still baffles us to this day that Overwatch hasn't endorsed this same philosophy. Playing solo in games has always been harder when it's a team game, and if you want to rectify that, well, like we did in the old days of PC gaming online or Xbox Live, add people as a friend, group up. Overwatch is severely missing an opportunity for people to make connections in game, in some cases, lifelong friends, just through playing a video game together. One cool thing about Battle Royales, and Apex is no different, is that if you want to have your own pre-made squad or go in with randoms, you do you, but there isn't hurdles or anchors or punishments put into place in order to disincentivize you from doing so. Now granted, Apex Legends doesn't have a ranked mode yet. It'll be interesting to see how they balance that out. But trust me when I say, nobody is complaining at how unfair it is to potentially get matched up against Shroud, who's an absolute killer in this game, by the way, and oftentimes is squatted up with other former pro players, and they're just going to destroy everything in front of them because it's a video game. It's meant to have fun. This really stems, I think, from people being too fascinated with the idea of fairness in competition, which isn't a thing and has never been a thing. Overwatch League is starting this week. There's a whole lot of matches that aren't even close to fair. Some teams will get absolutely destroyed. It happens. It's a game. But the good thing about when this happens in an environment where there's a ranking system is that you and your friends will go up or down where you belong as a group. And any solo players out there will also go up and down based on the meta that evolves based on the group play. Because as it is right now, the Overwatch rank system largely is based on throwing and has been the entire time of its existence. Yep, throwing. Who can stop the throw? Who can capitalize on the throw? Who can not throw the longest? I say this as someone who's just reached top 500, the absolute height of how high you can go in the rank system. A huge percentage of my games are won because the enemy team, who also are this highly ranked, are throwing. This is outrageous. It can't go on any longer. Instead, when you allow groups to succeed in the ranked matchmaker, what happens is gameplay sets the meta instead of throwing. So yes, you will have a lot harder games, but if you think that's too much for you, rest assured, you're going to have a lot more fun when you drop rank to where you would be placed to have a 50% win rate up against groups as well. Even if worst case scenario, every game you played against was against a tryhard sweaty group, the worst thing that could happen is that you drop to a place where you'll beat those groups at least half of the time. That's how ELO systems work. That's how SR works. The SR system has to be fair, not team balance, and the idea that it should be ignores how competition works. I've seen so many pre-made teams submit gameplay to be reviewed to youroverwatchplays@gmail.com, and they'll be in a full 6 stack of golds, and the only difference between them and a mixed group of golds on the enemy team is that they're attempting to make a team comp some of the time, which should be the norm anyway. The idea that groups have some massive bias is just hilarious to me. Most groups suck just as bad as you do. And yeah, this is different at the top 500 level where you actually have OWL pros playing against ladder players. Okay, fine. Maybe we have different rules for that. But for the majority of the player base, there is nearly no advantage to grouping up. In fact, it's such a disadvantage that nobody does it. And it should be the other way around. It should be a joy to group up with your friends and play and figure out and learn the game, but it's not. And not only does that make ranked bad for the people who don't want to play with randoms and want to play with their friends, it makes ranked bad for solo queue. Because if I can get all the way to the top few hundred players in SR and people are still throwing half the games, well, there's no end to it. What exactly is the point of all this fairness if at no point do you have a reliable play experience. It's crazy. In fact, I hear from a lot of comments from you guys as well that you often have a lot more fun being at lower ranks. So when you go up a rank or two, a lot of times your enjoyment of the game goes down. And I'll agree with you. Diamond players might not know much about the game, but they're a heck of a lot more laid back than Masters players are, who a big percentage of them are top 500 Smurf accounts who are just completely apathetic towards the result of the game. So this is where we're at, Overwatch, Blizzard developers. I really hope we don't write off the success that Apex Legends has had as if it's just another BR flash in the pan. No, it distinctly dealt with problems that gamers had with these different games, and it competed. Now it's time for Overwatch to come back with its own set of innovations that deal with the problems that the players were trying to overcome this entire time. It should be the #1 priority on Blizzard's list. Otherwise, there won't be any players around to watch the Overwatch League, no matter how good it is. Because right now, we don't have a fulfilling solo queue experience or team experience. We just have an absolute free-for-all with no structure at all. And it's time that Blizzard gets their hands dirty and develops systems that'll be useful for the player base. And when they do, watch how many people will be excited to play Overwatch again. We'll no longer have to make guides on how to actually enjoy playing the game. It'll just be a thing you naturally do when you hit Q. And on the other end of things, you'll be surprised how much of that toxicity goes down when everybody's having a good time. And there's not legitimate reasons to be frustrated or angry at things your teammates are doing, because it's already been worked out diplomatically. Or, you know, you bring your own group. So guys, if you enjoyed the video, please be sure to let us know in the comment section down below. Really hoping that Blizzard takes a notice of the success that Apex is having in connecting to the larger player base and a big percentage of Overwatch players as well, and incorporate those ideas yesterday. Doesn't have to be the ideas that I came up with, but doing nothing towards the player experience is unacceptable in my opinion. This is more important than hero balance, more important than the Overwatch League. They need to focus on the things that make the experience of playing their game unfun fun again. If you agree, be sure to hit the like button, and if you watch the video this far, why not subscribe? And be sure to hit the bell icon so that you get notified when our videos go live. Link to the description is our Twitter, where we tweet out news, updates, and dank memes. That's been it for me. I've been FREEDO for Your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.